Hey, good morning everyone. Here we are on our Thursday. Let's go ahead and get started. Just give me a couple seconds to let people join on and double check my audio and double check my video and everything, and then we'll jump into our webinar this morning. Very excited to be with you guys. Good morning, Laura. How's it going? Hope the ankle's feeling better. Just give me 1 second here. All right. So we're pretty high tech. I love leveraging technology. Welcome to everyone on the Instagram live. So we kind of got two things going simultaneously here. Hey, can you guys hear me okay? Just want to make sure the audio is good and the video is good. Try and get my mic a little bit closer here if I can. All right. Well, whether you guys are joining us on the live or whether you guys are joining us on the replay here, I want to welcome everyone to today's Facebook Live webinar on everything related to leaky brain. This is actually part 2. I'll call it part 2A of a series of webinars that I really want to dive into, focusing on gut health and brain health and the applications of the chiropractic adjustment for both of those things. That being said, just for your context, last week we did a leaky gut webinar. So if you actually scroll through, at least on the Facebook group side of things, it saves the video so you can watch the replay. Also, if you're not able to join us on the live this morning for the leaky brain discussion, this is also going to be saved in the group as well in the timeline, so you can go back and reference it as well. And hey guys, please, if you have any questions, this is the great part of technology. There can be interaction. So go ahead, post questions in those comment boxes and let us know how we can help you more and how we can make this real and relevant. Okay, so again, one more thing by way of notation here. There's so much to get through in this talk, in this webinar relating to the brain. I actually want to divide it up in itself into 2 talks. So you might even call it a triple threat, if you will, with the leaky gut discussion that we had last week, and then 2 installments of the leaky brain webinar. But with all that said, I'm just going to go ahead and pull up the screen here, pull up the webinar, and we will get started. I've learned that I really have to drink water because I will dry my voice out with all this talking. So here we go. All right, so here is our leaky brain discussion. And again, guys, we're not going to be able to talk about everything today. I highly want to direct you towards the Michigan Family Wellness Podcast, where we cover so much information on how to elevate your health and your family wellness lifestyle. This is really the best place to go. It's on your iPhone, it's on your Android. Just search for the Michigan Family Wellness Podcast and sync up with us there. Tons of free, valuable, relevant content. All right, so here's our brain warm-up. So for those of you who may not be familiar, just like with skeletal maturity, so our skeletal system, our brain, or that process of myelination, does not complete itself until we're 25 years old. As of 2014, 8 to 10% of Americans have a thyroid problem. 90% of those are autoimmune thyroid. Okay, so there is no medical, when you look at medicine, when we look at our modern context here with the allopathic treatments, there is no autoimmunologist. Okay, so yes, we need emergency medicine. Yes, we need that acute care, but what do we do with the people who have the chronic diseases, the autoimmune conditions, the multiple scleroses, the Hashimoto's thyroiditis people? There's so much that can be done on a natural alternative level to really help these people. All right, couple more notes here. On MRI, post-traumatic stress disorder looks the same as a concussion. So if you've ever really hit your head or had a severe fall when you were younger or been in a car accident and you're having depressive type symptoms right now, this can be a plausible mechanism for that anxiety, for that depression. Finally, there are tons of therapies for our organs, okay, for our liver, our gallbladder, our stomach, and unfortunately, a lot of the times, your surgeon will just recommend anectomy or taking it out. But there are not many therapies for our brain. So when you look at degeneration, when you look at dementia, when you look at Alzheimer's, there's not a whole lot of concrete therapies out there. That being said, there are the concepts of neuroplasticity and epigenetics. Okay, so the question then becomes practically, how do you leverage epigenetics and the principles of neuroplasticity to elevate your health, your lifestyle, and to prevent early onset brain degeneration? I hope that all makes sense. Let me know if you have any questions on that. Just like to show you guys that we are real people here. I like to get personal and just let you guys a little glimpse into my own life. This is my wife and I, Rachel. We are actually here in North Carolina on a hike that we did at Grandfather Mountain earlier this year. We're actually coming up on our 5-year anniversary here in August, so we're very excited. And later on this month, my cousin is getting married up in Petoskey, so we'll be going to Pictured Rocks up in the UP there a few days before the wedding, and then coming back down. Okay, brilliant. That being said, again, guys, here's the thing. This is why I like doing these Facebook webinars. There's so much information out there, it's a blessing and a curse. So I highly recommend really vetting and trusting your sources. This slide just demonstrates, or this frame demonstrates, that I've gone to so many postgraduate educational hours on top of my doctorate of chiropractic degree. So you can really trust the information that we're talking about today. Everything is based in the literature. So please, don't take my word for it. Go ahead, do your own PubMed searches. You have to be your own advocate these days, but I really just want to illustrate that what we're talking about is fundamentally based in the literature. All right. So let's go over some basic neurology. When we look at the central nervous system, we essentially have our brain and our spinal cord, okay? So with that in mind, we know that our brain sends impulses down our spinal cord to every tissue in our body, okay? That is the master communication system or mechanism for our entire body. So this profoundly affects muscle contraction. This profoundly affects how we live our lives every day, from picking our kids up to reaching for things up in the cupboard to bending over to get something out of the fridge. Neurology is practically at work here every single moment of your lives, especially as it relates to digestion. All right, so what I want to illustrate here are basically how the vagus nerve innervates every component of our digestive system and our digestive organs, okay? So let's unpack that. What is the vagus nerve? All right, there are 12 cranial nerves, and the vagus nerve is number 10, okay? It comes out of our brainstem, and it innervates so much of our body, especially our digestive system. Every organ that relates to digestion, arguably every organ that we have, is innervated by the vagus nerve. Even parts of the heart. There's branches of the vagus nerve that go to the heart to help with that parasympathetic response or slowing of the heart rate, okay? So what's the implication of this? This means that in the same way that we can exercise muscles or skeletal muscle, we can also exercise specific nerves by firing them, by stimulating them, okay? This gets into our discussion of neuroplasticity, all right? So again, in the same way that we can exercise muscle, we can exercise the vagus nerve. And in the same way that if we don't exercise our muscles, the muscles will eventually atrophy, and we won't be able to use them when our body needs to, okay? So, vagal nerve degeneration can beget brain degeneration, all right? So we have to be able to fire our vagus nerve. For those of you that may not have a gag reflex, that can play into early onset brain degeneration or lead to a presentation of leaky gut, okay? We'll get into the functional neurology exercises later, but I want to go ahead and go back to the slide here. Cervical spine and occipital chiropractic adjustments affect vagal nerve function tone, as well as lumbar and sacral adjustments will affect the plexus of nerves, so the lumbosacral plexus, or the lumbar plexus and the sacral plexus, that innervate the nerves that go to our gut or our colon, our small and large intestine, okay? So what is this saying? This is saying that the application of that artful chiropractic adjustment is extremely powerful, okay? This is what gets me really excited, because we can affect, as chiropractors, naturally with our hands, how our vagus nerve is functioning and improve that functioning over time, which is phenomenal, because when you look at the alternatives, there's nothing else on the planet that can do the same thing in the same way. Arguably, acupuncture gets pretty close. All right, I would even say the collaboration between your licensed, emphasis on licensed acupuncturist and your licensed chiropractor would be a great combination to really influence the function of the vagus nerve. So as you can see here, the vagus nerve is innervating the liver. We've got the pancreas, the small intestine. This is where I get really nerdy. This is the sphincter of Oddi, where a lot of the enzymes and the juices, the enzymatic juices, are secreted into the small intestine. Sphincter of Oddi, the ampulla of Vater, the pancreatic ducts, and then the small intestine here. All right. A lot of people don't have a gallbladder, okay? So if your stool is floating, that can really be a sign of gallbladder insufficiency or gallbladder stasis. Also, the thumb web index right here on your right hand, check and see if that's tender. That can be a good indicator in terms of physical diagnosis if you're having gallbladder issues, all right? So moving along here, like I said, we got to break this up into 2 talks because there's just so much to go over. All right, another illustration on how the nerves that go from our brain to our spine innervate all of the tissues of our body, okay? So this is showing actually a parasympathetic innervation, how we have nerves going to the heart, to our eyes, ears, nose, and throat, to our lungs, and even the liver, the stomach, the spleen, the gut, our rectum, everything here, kidneys, blood pressure, all that. All right, here is a great example or illustration of specifically the vagus nerve. So you can see here the right and left vagus going down, innervating parts of the heart, branches that go off to the heart, branches that go to the liver, the spleen, the stomach, the pancreas. A lot of this we already talked about, the kidneys, and even the colon here with the myenteric or the enteric plexi down here. All right? Brilliant. So again, if you can appreciate, here's the spine on the right. When you adjust the cervical spine and the occiput, as well as the lumbar spine, you're really affecting that vagal nerve tone, and you're improving that tone. So that's the practical application here. That's the big take-home point. All right, here is a cadaver image of a degenerated brain. Okay, so go ahead and just look at this picture of the brain here real quick. Can you see a difference if you were to look, here's the midline, can you see a difference between one side and the other? Okay, so essentially there's much more degeneration. So if this is the front and if this is the back of the head, there's much more degeneration on this side, your left, this person's right. So you would extrapolate that this person may have some early onset brain degeneration issues, like it may be hard for them to remember names and numbers, or exactly the way that they took to get to a certain destination in terms of the route that they took. Or a common thing is, if you stick this person in a mall, could they tell you exactly how they got there? Okay, so that goes with our spatial memory, okay? Forgetting names and numbers, tiredness, fatigue, all of this correlates with a degenerated parietal lobe over here on this right-hand side. Okay, this person could also have some motor control issues on this right-hand side. And yeah, again, what we're talking about today and the next few weeks here is how to prevent getting to this point. Okay, that's where the epigenetics comes in, that's where our lifestyle comes in, and of course, that's where the artful chiropractic adjustments come in, because we're actually affecting brain neurology and brain chemistry. All right. There are three things that our neurons fundamentally need: oxygen, glucose, and stimulation. Okay? So most of our neurons are going to have oxygen by default. However, in cases of low blood flow, all right, or low nitric oxide, we need to support those biochemical pathways as well. All right? So our blood delivers nutrients like we have here. These nutrients are delivered via our circulation system, our cardiac function, or the blood flow. If we don't have good blood flow, then we're not going to have good oxygen to these neurons and to our target tissues, our muscles, our organs, our glands, all those things, our cells. Okay? Second thing here, glucose. All right? Our brain actually does need sugar. You know, we have all this talk about running on proteins and fats, and all those are good. You know, we want to get away from the carbohydrates and the sugars as it relates to our metabolism. However, our brain fundamentally requires glucose as a preferred method, or ketones. And that's a whole nother discussion for a whole nother webinar. We'll go into that later. But ketones, there's a lot of research coming out right now that suggests the benefits and value of using ketones to prevent early onset brain degeneration. And then finally, as we were mentioning earlier, stimulation. You have to fire your nerves. It's that old saying, if you don't use it, you're going to lose it. Okay? So motion, a diversity of motion, a diversity of nutrition, a diversity of foods, those are the things that we're talking about that profoundly influence our epigenetics, or our expression of our genetic code, essentially. Just to go back to the slide here, early onset depression and brain-based fatigue is the early stage. So this is where we want to catch people. All right, this is the time to do something at this early stage down here. You don't want to wait till you start experiencing the signs of early onset neurodegeneration and progressed neuronal mitochondrial deficits, because then we're already progressed. All right, and a lot of this goes with the aging process, but again, the way that you live profoundly affects what genes are expressed. All right, and then over here at the very extreme, this is our Alzheimer's, this is our Parkinson's disease. It's not that it's too late to do anything over here. However, the therapies, the mechanisms that we're discussing, you're going to have to be so diligent and so convicted and so congruent with them at this stage to really get the maximum benefit and the maximum effect. And again, sometimes it really is just, there's not much that can be done at that point. All right, just another brain map here. There are all these areas of the brain itself: the frontal lobe, the cerebral cortex, the parietal lobe, occipital lobe. And what we can do is, going back to our brain degeneration slide here, we can actually draw clinical conclusions about what areas of the brain or what functions this person may have had difficulty with. All right. So again, more of the same, just kind of moving along through here. This is one of my favorites. This is actually a diagram of the dural venous sinuses. So for those people that have hit their head, maybe have a concussion, the cranial sacral therapies that we do here at the Michigan Family Wellness Clinic profoundly affect the circulation and of not only blood but also lymphatic flow in the dural venous sinuses here. Brilliant. Again, this is demonstrating the brain stem, okay? So if you can imagine, if you follow my mouse here on the screen, you have the cerebral cortex up here, you have the cerebellum down just below that, and then you have the brain stem. This is the very top of the spinal cord. Think of this as the junction between the brain and the spine is that brain stem area, all right? What I want to point out here to you guys is 90% of the brain's output goes to this little guy right here. This is called the pons, okay? What's so great about the pons? The pons is the location for the vagal motor nuclei. What's the vagal motor nuclei, Dr. Kyle? The vagal motor nuclei is, I don't know why iTunes just popped up. The vagal motor nuclei is the place where the vagus nerve originates. Okay? So that's profound because we can influence that vagal motor nuclei with our chiropractic adjustments because our C1 occiput junction is right over here at the very bottom of the spinal of the brainstem, top of the spinal cord. All right. So if that doesn't get you excited, it gets me very excited. We'll say that. All right, this is a great YouTube video. I highly recommend you guys check this out, how chronic stress affects your brain. We don't have time to go through it today, but go ahead and YouTube this video to get a really good context for this discussion here. Okay, so again, how do we fundamentally analyze a person or an individual here at the clinic? One of the questions that we ask the person is, are you regular? Okay, do you have a motility issue? Are you going to the bathroom at least once a day? Specifically number 2, okay? So if we're not, then we have undigested food, which is fermenting in the gut, because I know that they're eating, causing inflammation, leading to bacterial overgrowths, dysbiosis, an upset microbiome, yeast infections, hypochlorhydria, or low stomach acid, which can lead to a parasite environment. Okay, so this fancy word here is peristalsis, and that relates to the flow of food, that systematic contraction of the large intestine as it waves through the gut. Okay, that's peristalsis. So this has to deal with motility. Guess what controls motility? The brain, specifically the vagus nerve. Okay, so motility is a brain-based issue. So how do you move your food? These are some great questions. Ask yourself these questions. Is there a disproportionate, I love asking this question, is there a disproportionate sensation of needing to go and then actually going? So a lot of people tell me, I get this huge urge to go, okay, that's frontal cortex, that's way up here, and then I get to the restroom and I get on the throne, and then nothing happens, or a very small amount happens, okay? That's a brain-based issue, and that's something that we can easily correct. That being said, constipation. So again, are we actually going? Do you need coffee or magnesium or an herbal laxative to have a bowel movement? Again, there are many different ways to kind of biohack bowel movements. These are some examples: coffee, magnesium, or herbal laxatives. But again, if you're always relying on those, that's fundamentally a brain-based issue. Okay? Another way to say this is neurogenic. Brain-based, neurogenic, or generating or originating in the brain or the neurons. Here's the big take-home point. Supplements alone will not fix neurogenic brain-gut axis dysfunction. You have to train the brain. Okay, so like we talked about earlier, in the same way that we can exercise our muscles, we have to exercise the vagus nerve to actually fix this problem. Okay, taking the enzymes, taking the stomach acids and all of that, taking the probiotics, very good things, but fundamentally we want to be able to have this person function on their own, which requires that parasympathetic tone, that vagus nerve function. And that's where the functional neurology exercises come in. I just want to pause this for a second here. I want to go ahead and see if our other feed is still going. Hang on for me, guys, 1 second. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and start this back up. All right, I think we lost the Instagram feed there for a second, so I just turned it back on. So welcome if you're joining us kind of mid-talk here, but we're going to go ahead and continue through our Leaky Brain webinar here. This is actually an illustration of neuroplasticity. Okay, so in this YouTube video, which I would love to show you guys, you can actually see the growth of the neurons themselves between one and the other as a result of these vagal nerve exercises that we've been talking about. Very, very interesting. Really got to check this out, guys. If you want, send me a message, send me a link. I will send me a private message. I will send you the link to view this video. It'll blow your mind. Again, this is illustrating the concept and the principle of neuroplasticity. All right? So again, plasticity does not happen with just supplements alone, by taking our digestive supplements, our stomach acids, our enzymes, our probiotics, all those things, okay? Plasticity happens by actually exercising the nerve, all right? Another fancy term for neuroplasticity is mitochondrial biogenesis, all right? This is cool stuff, guys, all right? And this goes both ways. So in the same way, if we don't exercise our muscles, they're going to atrophy. If we don't exercise our nerves, they're going to atrophy and not work as powerfully as well. All right. Other brain-based signals, again, everything goes back to the brain, the vagus nerve. Stomach acid production, pancreatic enzyme release, gallbladder function, bile release, and motility. Okay? Moving right along here. Okay, so clinically, how do we test, how do we evaluate this? So again, like I was saying earlier, how many bowel movements are you having per day? At least one. A lot of research suggests after every meal you should be really, if you're really not having a stressful lifestyle, you should be really having some sort of bowel movement after every meal. Okay? Lifestyle, exercise, sleep, and stress, this all plays into the thorough history. Okay? The physical exam. Here's a great thing you guys can do on your own. You can actually take a pen light or just take the phone, take your phone. There's often a light on the end of the phone. You can shine that into your mouth, and you can do the uvula arch test. Okay, so the roof of the mouth is called the uvula, and what you can do is say ah. You know how when you go to the doctor and they do the tongue depress and they look at and they do the ah test. So say ah, but watch the roof of your mouth. What you're looking for is a raised arch on both sides. Okay, this is an evaluation of vagal nerve function. All right. The other thing you can do, which I love to do in the office here, is actually auscultate the bowel sounds with a stethoscope. Okay, so putting the stethoscope in the ears and auscultating all four quadrants of the gut, of the intestines. Going back to what we had said earlier, does this person have a gag reflex? Is it absent or present? Because that gag reflex is like doing push-ups for the vagus nerve. Okay? To continue that analogy, the gag reflex is like doing push-ups for the vagus nerve. The gargling exercise is like doing cardiovascular or going for a run for the vagus nerve. So that's the analogy that's used. Here's a great video on bowel sounds. Again, you can just YouTube this video, check it out. I highly recommend having an idea for what these sound like. Here's the other thing. These bowel sounds should be present frequently. Okay, within a few seconds you should hear the bowel sounds. If you don't, if you have absent bowel sounds, that's a concern. That's something that you need to address, you need to work on, because that can promote leaky gut presentations and early onset brain neurodegeneration. All right? So here's why the gut matters. This goes into our discussion from leaky gut, which was last week. I don't want to spend a ton of time here, but I do want to go over some definitions. Dysbiosis, if you've heard of that, that's an imbalance in the gut microbiomes, or an imbalance in the good bacteria and the bad bacteria. Okay? So we do need bacteria, but we need the good guys. Okay? We don't want the bad guys. Okay, so that's dysbiosis. Dysponesis, this is getting technical here, that's a reversible pathologic state where the brain and the body aren't communicating properly, okay? In applied kinesiology or muscle testing, we refer to this condition as switching, okay? Don't worry about that so much. We fix that clinically in the office through the muscle testing and through the adjustments that we do. But the take-home point here is the gut bacteria affects the brain because of the vagus nerve relationship, and your gut microbiome actually makes neurotransmitters. So if you've heard of serotonin, you've heard of dopamine, most of those are actually produced in the gut. Okay? Let's use the Thanksgiving example. All right? You eat a bunch of turkey, and then you start making serotonin. Okay? Tryptophan, the amino acid that's prevalent in turkey meat, is the precursor to serotonin, which makes you drowsy or sleepy. So that's the relationship there. All right, so more information about those specific strains. Now we get into discussion of, for the people that actually want to see this on paper, on purpose, okay, there is very advanced testing available, okay? What I tell my patients to do is use Cyrex laboratories, where we can actually test and evaluate for not only leaky brain, but also leaky gut. Cyrex Array 2 actually goes through the presence for the two types of leaky gut, okay, because one begets the other. So there's actually a form called transcellular, and we would see elevated actomycin antibodies on the transcellular leaky gut example. And then on the paracellular leaky gut presentation, we would see elevated zonulin or occludin antibodies. All right, so we can actually order those tests at the Michigan Family Wellness Clinic. All right, same thing with the brain. We can actually measure with the blood-brain barrier permeability test from Cyrex. This is Array 20. We can actually measure the blood-brain barrier protein IgG and IgA combined. So this is the new gold standard for testing for leaky brain. The old way of doing things, and you can do this with yourself actually if you'd like, you can take a very high quality GABA supplement. Okay, GABA is a neurotransmitter, and what you can do is you can take oral GABA supplementation into your gut. All right? If you feel any kind of effect, whether that's a hyper response, you get kind of really irritable or a lot of energy, or you get kind of a sedated response, what does that mean? That means that the GABA you just took, that neurotransmitter, is crossing your blood-brain barrier. Okay? The normal response, so if your blood-brain barrier is intact, the response for that is no effect. Okay? So if you have a sedative effect, you have leaky brain. If you have a paradoxical hyper effect, you have leaky brain. If you have no response, then your blood-brain barrier is intact. That's normal. Congratulations. Okay, but here's the thing. We can actually test for this as well. All right. So for those of you that know Pinky in the Brain, here's our little comic relief here. All right, so let's go through some questions again, just to help you guys really get to identify with this sort of thing. Ask yourself these questions as well. Feeling as though the bowels don't completely empty. Are we constipated or do we have constant diarrhea? Difficulty with navigation or directions. That's a function of the hippocampus. And there's our little hippopotamus there. Coated tongue or fuzzy debris on the tongue. That can also be a physical diagnosis factor for candida. Noticeable memory decline. All right, again, early onset brain degeneration symptom. Difficult time remembering names, numbers, and places. Hard to learn new things. High stress level, never have time for yourself. Sharing your problems with someone is difficult or vulnerability. Feelings of inner rage or paranoia. Feel like you are not enjoying life. More susceptible to pain. Feelings of hopelessness and worthlessness. Feeling tired even after several hours of sleep. That's a very common one that I hear a lot. Isolating yourself. from others, an inability to finish an inability to finish tasks. That's often a dopamine response, along with motivation. Decreased libido even, and losing your temper easily. All right. Let's kind of round out our webinar today with our discussion on gluten. Okay. So here's the take-home point. Bad gluten is bad for you and most people. Okay. So your Wonder Breads, most of your breads out there on the market, just avoid them completely. All right. Whether you're gluten sensitive or celiac or just trying to live a healthier lifestyle, just avoid the bread completely. I'm with Dr. Perlmutter on this. Just completely avoid the stuff. You're going to be better off. That being said, if anyone has seen the documentary Cooked on Netflix, there are people out there who are making breads in the old-fashioned ways, so that when people ingest them, they don't have the same autoimmune reactions. They don't feel dizzy. They don't feel fatigued after they have bread that's been prepared and made the proper way. Or, what patients will tell me oftentimes too is when they go to Europe or when they go to Australia or parts of the world where they don't use genetically modified seeds and foods and plants, then they feel like they're fine as well. They can have their baguettes and their scones and their muffins and their bagels, and they're fine. But when they come back to the U.S., that's when their symptoms return when they have those foods. Okay? So, one take-home point here that I really want to drive home is the concept of molecular mimicry. Okay? So what scientists have discovered is that the gluten protein itself resembles not only the cerebellum, or the part of our brain that controls a lot of our autonomic functions, but also our thyroid. So if you suspect that you have any thyroid symptoms, I want you to be gluten-free, dairy-free, soy-free. Essentially, you're on an anti-inflammatory diet indefinitely. Okay? And the reason why is because when you have that piece of bread, or when your immune system sees that gluten protein, it also sees your brain, and it also sees your thyroid, and it has a hard time differentiating between the two. So it says, hey, what the heck, let's attack everything. And that's why we get our symptoms. Okay? Inability to lose weight, major cause of autoimmune thyroid. All right? So let's further illustrate this point. Let's further drive this home. This is molecular mimicry, also called cross-reactivity. Okay? So as you can appreciate here, this is the amino acid sequence for gliadin, or a component of gluten, and this is the amino acid sequence for the cerebellum. Okay? As you can see, there are 4 similar amino acids in those same locations, and that's why your immune system not only attacks the gluten, but it also attacks your brain and your thyroid in this case. Okay? Cerebellar disease, cerebellar ataxia, that's when you have vertigo or balance issues, loss of coordination, difficulty concentrating right after you eat a piece of bread. Okay? Alcoholism also impairs, or alcoholism, when you do have alcohol, that also impairs the cerebellum as well. Right underneath this blue line here, this is also demonstrating the myelin basic protein and an amino acid sequence for streptococcus. Okay, so the microorganism, the bacteria strep. All right, when you look at that and compare it to myelin basic protein, okay, myelin is the protein that surrounds our nerves. Okay, so if you've heard of multiple sclerosis, all right, unresolved, ongoing multiple sclerosis could be caused by an ongoing, undetected, unidentified streptococcus presentation or infection. Okay? And that's not Dr. Kyle saying that, that's the research and that's the literature saying that. Okay? Because when the immune system sees the streptococcus protein sequence, or the amino acid sequence, it also sees the myelin sequence, and it has that same attack response, like in this example up here with the gliadin and the cerebellum. All right. Well, guys, we're going to actually cut it off right there. We are about halfway through our webinar for this morning. I want to pick this back up actually in 2 weeks because my wife and I will be gone. Next week we're going to be camping up north. But we will pick back up with neurotransmitters and our leaky brain discussion in 2 weeks here. I'll send everyone another Facebook event invite. And again, guys, if you have any questions, please go ahead and comment in the sections below. In the meantime, between now and then, definitely sync up with us on the Michigan Family Wellness Podcast on your iPhone and your Android. And again, guys, I really want to thank you all for coming out and joining us today on this Facebook Live webinar, everyone on the Instagram feed. Honor and appreciation to all of you. The final thing I do want to mention is the upcoming August 23rd open house, the New Clinic open house. We're going to have tremendous food, delicious food, gluten-free, healthy food from Chef Christie, and we're also going to have incredible cheesecake from John LaPola. So we're very excited for that. We're also going to do a raffle here, guys. So there's going to be great opportunities to get in on some health and wellness, not only services, but also products that could be involved. So I really encourage you guys to come out, support the community, and be part of the Michigan Family Wellness community here. Thanks again, guys. Have an awesome Thursday, and we'll talk to you soon.